Shalom family, this is a call for support for the Yahusha Estate Project. The video for the longer presentation will be linked in here or will be in the description. What if you had the chance to help Noah build the ark? What if you could stand beside Moses and Aaron as they led our people out of Egypt? Would you say yes? Would you act? Well, this mission is just like that. The Yahusha Estate is being built here in Ghana as a refuge, a safe place for the awakening remnant around the world. This is more than land. It's obedience. It's prophecy. It's preparation. So pray, share, and if Yahuwah leads you, give. Let's build this place together. And may Yahuwah bless us all.
Greetings, family. Welcome back to the AfrikanExodus show. My name is Sister Tyranny, here to you with a new video. Before we get started with today's show, reminder to all of you, if you want to stay connected outside of YouTube, and this is especially important if you want notifications anytime that I post a new video, you can simply add yourself to my Telegram app. On there, I post every time that I upload a new video. In addition, if you do feel glad to support what we do on this platform, you can simply send a donation to Cashapp. Also, you can do so to Patreon. The Patreon link is in the description. And also, to PayPal. The PayPal link is in the description. But Patreon is also in the description. And on Patreon, I also post, by the way, any of the PDFs that I use in the presentation. So I'll be posting all of these things on Patreon. Okay, so we're going forward talking about Rabbinic Judaism. Who are they? What are they doing? What are they teaching? What is it that is perverse about some of these things that we can actually trace back to? I would say you can trace it back to Lucifer, okay? And I also want to remind you all, obviously we know of the scripture saying that there's a synagogue of Satan. So let's just read through that scripture very quickly. Revelations 3:9 says, "Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews or Yahudim and are not, but lie. I will make them come and bow down before your feet and make them know that I have loved you." And so if you don't know, this is right from the book of Revelations. Again, Revelations 3:9, a prophecy spoken right from the mouth of Yahusha, okay? Something that's important, different things you should pick up from the scripture. One, there is a synagogue of Satan, okay? What does it look like? I don't know. I only know certain things that I can directly see. This must be it, right? So there's some type of institution, some type of assembly, you know, as a synagogue is an assembly, right? So a synagogue of Satan, there's some type of institution that Yahusha called the synagogue of Satan, right? What else do we know? We know that there's a people who would call themselves Yahudim or Jews, and those people would not be. And that Yahusha instead was talking to the people who were. And to those people, they would not be called those, they would not be recognized by the world as being Yahudim. So this is important, obviously, because the shoe just fits, right? And so the shoe fits, you know, you can't ignore that. But yet so many people are willing to ignore that. So many people know that the idea that these people would be Yahudim does not make any sense. Yet these people are willing to go with it, okay? So with that, let's just talk about moon worship, because this is an important thing to understand. I believe, honestly, this is one of the most perverse things that comes from the Rabbinic Judaism. And because it actually relates directly to Lucifer, which I'm going to show you, this is something that I really implore all of you who are coming out of, maybe you're coming out of Christianity, maybe you're just waking up to the Torah and you're starting to practice the Torah. If there's anything, please, if there's anything that you do not adopt from Rabbinic Judaism, and it's a lot that you should not, like the Star of David, which is a satanic symbol, right? But if there's anything you do not adopt, I really hope that you do not adopt the moon worship that comes from this religion. You might say there's no moon worship. There is moon worship, and we're going to get into that. But the reason I say this really is so important to recognize, because this is literally paying adherence to the Prince of Lies, paying adherence to the one who is the deceiver of the nations. And we know him as Lucifer. We know him as Satan. We know him as the devil. We know that he is one that has an assembly. He happens to have an assembly. What a coincidence that certain people would do something, do a ritual that pays adherence to the Prince of Lies, and yet we know that there's something called a Synagogue of Satan. These are the clues that Yah gives us to piece things together. You're not going to get this information from mainstream Christianity. You're not going to get this information from the news. You will really have to search if you're going to get it from anywhere on the internet. I mean, these are things that Yah gives us through his scriptures. He gives us clues. He gives us little teachings that might not be significant to us at one time, but they come back into remembrance, particularly the more that you spend time with the Ruach HaKodesh. You have a spiritual memory. There might be a scripture you might have read when you were a child and you just did not understand the significance of it. And yet, because of your spiritual memory being revitalized, because of your relationship walking with the spirit of Yahuwah, those things will come to your remembrance. They'll start to make sense to you. Be like, oh, is that what it meant whenever it says this? And so we can key these things together and say, yes, Yah's speaking directly to us. There's literally an institution that will give adherence and worship to the Prince of Lies. There's literally an institution that would do that. And so we have to find them out. We have to root them out, and we have to certainly not take their word on anything about the Torah, about the Bible. Let the Bible speak on it for itself and on its own. We don't need someone else to come and give you an interpretation of the laws. The laws are sufficient in and of themselves. So let's go to the book of Jubilees, because I've said these verses so many times, but I just think it's important to always go back to this prophecy of a people who would have the people of Yasharel worshiping the moon. Yes, that's literally a prophecy. And yet so many people will tell you, don't pay attention to it. Just listen to me. I'm the authority on what is right and what is wrong, or we're the authority. Jubilees 2, 9 through 18, we're starting with verse 9. And Elohim appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days and for Sabbaths and for months and for feasts and for years and for Sabbaths of years and for jubilees and for all seasons of the years. It divided the light from the darkness and for prosperity, that all things may prosper which shoot and grow on earth. These three kinds he made on the fourth day. And on the fifth day he created the great sea monsters and the depths of the waters, for these were the things of flesh that were created by his hands, the fish and everything that moves in the waters and everything that flies, the birds and all their kind. And the sun rose above them to prosper, and above everything that was on earth, everything that shoots out of the earth, and all fruit-bearing trees and all flesh. These three kinds he created on the fifth. So what's of note inside of this particular scripture? The sun is a great sign. It's the sign as far as the day, the months, the years. The sun is the great sign that Yah gave. Now, when does this become relevant? This becomes relevant because Judaism will teach us, no, the moon's the great sign. And they teach a lot of things inverse from what Yahuwah taught us. So if you actually study, for example, when a day begins, they taught us the day begins at nighttime. And I did do a teaching on that. I'll post it here. Don't review that here. Go over to that teaching, when does a day begin? And also did a follow-up teaching that I'll also post here, where I explained that the day cycle is 24 hours, so to speak, sunrise until sunrise the next day. So they taught us something opposite, right? They taught us that the day begins when the sun goes down, whereas Yah told us that the sun is a great sign. So this is important to notice, because when you go forward to Jubilees 6, I'm going to go, I think, 33 through 38. So let's start with that. But they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment. Then they will disturb all their seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order. And they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. And all the children of Yasharah will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. For I will know, and from henceforth I will declare it unto thee, and it is not of my own devising, for the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of days is ordained. Lest they forget the feast of the covenant, walking according to the feast of the Gentiles, after their error and after their ignorance. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year, 10 days too soon. For this reason, a year will come upon them when they will disturb the order, and make an abominable day the day of the testimony, an unclean day a feast day. And they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean with the holy, for they will go wrong as to the months and the Sabbaths, feasts, and jubilees. For this reason I command to testify to thee, that thou mayest testify to them. For after thy death thy children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the new moons and the seasons and Sabbaths and festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh. So there's so many things in this particular prophecy warning that was given to us. But this thing that we're going to point out right now, again, it was literally prophesied that a people would base their calendar on the cycles of the moon. And that because they based their calendar on the cycles of the moon, they would err as far as Sabbaths, they would err as far as months, they would err as far as determining what day it was. Not just that, because they did this, their calendar would be 10 days too soon, because the calendar that we get from the book of Jubilees in Enoch is how many days? 364. How many days is the calendar in Judaism? 354. What a coincidence that all of these warnings are actually being shown inside of Rabbinic Judaism. So we have to always keep this in mind, because this is a prophecy, and Yah gives us these for actual reasons. Some people think it's just so that we can sit back and meditate on the possibilities of how these things are going to manifest. But when you're dealing with ones like this, particularly that are modern day occurrences, that's for you to have a clear understanding of what is Yah's and what is not his. Otherwise, you will fall for the deception. Now, some people will tell you these things are inconsequential. Just keep the Sabbath whenever you want to keep the Sabbath, or just try to keep the Torah, try to keep the feast days. No one can have it right. That's a completely wrong attitude to have. Every single one of us should have the attitude that we are here to seek Yah, follow his Ruach, and uncover the truth. And if something is a lie, I don't know about you, but for me, if something's a lie, I want zero parts of it. So if there's a possibility, and there's always a possibility because none of us are infallible, that we could be doing something that is wrong, I want to root it out. All of us should have that in our hearts to root it out. Who was it? I believe it was King Josiah. It could have been Hezekiah. I'll post it on a note on the screen. But the king of Yasharel, who was so abhorred by, or king of Judah, I think rather, he was so abhorred by the sins of the people, the sins of Yasharel, that he would not stop until he found every single pagan shrine, every single deity that was represented anywhere, every single thing that he could find, every single monument that was built. He just had to tear them down. Why? Because he was fervently for Yahuwah, fervently had his heart for him, to where I want to root it all out. That's how we're supposed to be. None of us should ever be satisfied of, oh, I have a good calendar. And I'm saying this for myself. I have a good calendar. I'm good with it. I don't want to search for more truth. I don't want to find anything else out. I'm just going to stick to this and make this my calendar. Or I'm going to stick to this and make this my Sabbath. Stick to this and make this my understanding of the Torah. No, if you are, again, one of Yah's people, you are fervently for him. You are constantly in the spirit, seeking direction, seeking to be better, seeking to be made perfect. That is what the Ruach is supposed to do for us. It's supposed to refine us over time. So with all this being said, whenever we're getting these warnings, we have to take it serious. Okay, someone's going to be making a calendar that comes in 10 days too soon, and they're going to have us not representing our calendar how Yah created it and by Yah's order. Instead of the great sign being used to calculate the calendar, they're going to be using the moon. These are all things that we're told to look out for. And just so happens that inside of Rabbinic Judaism, these are things that are done. So we're going to just start off talking about, from a Jewish perspective, let's actually read from them what they say about the moon, okay? This is from the website Religions Facts. And so we're going to read, it says, the moon, a symbol of the Jewish people's connection to God. Now, is the Jewish people the Hebrew people of the Bible? Well, by now you should know that no, that's not the case. But let's read. Jews have traditionally calculated the new moon, and that is the first day of the of each new Jewish month, based on 358 CE. The Sanhedrin, a court of special significance to Jews, proclaimed the new moon in Judaism, or Jerusalem, sorry. Special gifts were given to the temple in Jerusalem as part of the celebration Rosh Chodesh in ancient times. Now, just so we speculate, is that Sanhedrin, could that actually be that institution that is the Synagogue of Satan? It could be. Or it could be some institution that remains unseen. But these are things that we're constantly on the lookout for because we take serious the warnings of Yahusha. So the Kiddush Levana, or the sanctification of the moon prayer, is a breathtaking piece of Jewish liturgy. The prayer prays that Jews be lifted up to the new moon, which is renewed on a monthly basis. As we observe the new moon, we were reminded that we have a responsibility to care for those who cannot do so on their own. Women are taught to be associated with the moon by Jewish mystical traditions. During the Exodus, they claim, some Jews lost faith in God after committing the sin of the golden calf on Rosh Chodesh. Some women have gathered together to recite prayers of or read the Torah. A month start or head, it is also a time of spiritual renewal. According to scripture, the new moon was the day that the prophet heard from Yahweh, and it was a day set aside for waiting and discerning Yahweh's will. Passover is a Jewish festival observed on the 15th of Nisan. Nisan is a Babylonian word. We're going to talk about this in a moment. A lunar month in which the moon's phases determines the time of year. Passover isn't the only lunar festival celebrated at Easter. It's also a lunar festival. The dates of Passover are determined by the lunar cycle in Hebrew. The month begins in Nisan when the moon is full, and ends in March or April of the Gregorian modern calendar. Because Passover is a holiday associated with the Easter bunny, it usually begins shortly after Easter. The harvest festival Sukkot usually begins on the new moon of Tishrei, the traditional time of the year when the sun rises earlier in the day, September or October in the Gregorian calendar. Because of this, it is possible that Sukkot is related to harvest season. The Passover celebrated on the new moon on Nisan, March or April in the Gregorian calendar. In Sukkot, the fall festival celebrated on the full moon of Tishrei or September, serves as signposts for these seasons. So important here, because what the Jubilees say, that because these people are going to make their calendar based on the moon, they're going to be not just ignoring the holy days, but they're going to have people celebrating things on days that are not set apart and not holy, and even days that are unclean. Now you might say, what is an unclean day? Well, an unclean day is the day that has been marked out from paganism as a day where we're going to pay adherence to a pagan deity, pay adherence to a false god, to a demon. These are now unclean because these are not being done in the name of Yahuwah. Now, is this what was done with the Jewish calendar? Well, yes. And we have a whole video on the Jewish calendar. I'm going to post that right here. And I also want you to understand that when it comes to the lunar calendar, there is a direct link between this and Babylon. And I know for some of our people, and I'm speaking particularly to people who are bloodline descendants of the people of Yasharel, many of us are constantly looking for hidden things, right? Like we have come to this revelation that there's hidden books, right? And that there's a hidden calendar or hidden things from the Bible that we just did not know. But some of us, because of that desire to uncover the true meaning of something, can run ourselves right into things that are false. One of the big examples is the lunar calendar and the lunar Sabbaths, something that pays direct adherence to moon deities. So what I want you to have your ears open for, as I'm going to read through the Babylonian traditions about the moon. And let's keep in mind, by the way, there's no evidence of any Jewish calendar before the Babylonian exile. That calendar comes from the exile. That's why the Babylonian calendar and the Jewish calendar has so many similarities. When you look at the names of the months on a Jewish calendar, they're Babylonian months. So there's a reason why during this entire experience, where we know Hebrews were sent into Babylon, and not only that, we also know that there was a mass conversion of people to Judaism. And we know that because the numbers of people who calling themselves Jewish or calling themselves of Hebrew descent increased so dramatically that people had to have converted into Torah, right? But they weren't just converting into Torah. They were converting into, again, this belief of Judaism, which is very wide and encompassing, as we talked about inside of our foundational teaching about Rabbinic Judaism. So it is during this time where a new calendar gets formed and these new understandings of the moon start. And it just so happens during the Babylonian exile. So we should ask, what was going on in Babylon when it comes to the moon? Let's look into that. So a reading from this article from actually the UASVbible.org. And the question they ask, how did the moon god sin and the sun god Shamash shape ancient Babylonian worship and beliefs? The moon god Sin, his origins and role in Mesopotamian religion. The moon god Sin, also known as Nana in the earlier Sumerian religion, holds a prominent place in the pantheon of Mesopotamian deities. Sin was considered the god of the moon and time, often depicted as an ancient and wise figure who controlled the passage of days, months, and seasons. His influence extended beyond the simple observation of lunar phases. Sin was believed to guide the movement of the stars and celestial bodies, thereby establishing order in the universe. He was worshipped primarily in the cities of Ur and Haran, with Ur being the center of his worship during the 3rd millennium BCE. Sin's influence on Babylonian society was deeply tied to the agricultural and economic cycles of Mesopotamia. As a lunar deity, Sin was associated with the regularity of the lunar calendar. Let me say that again. He was associated with the regularity of the lunar calendar, which was crucial for determining the time of agricultural activities such as planting and harvesting. The phases of the moon, guided by Sin, were seen as divinely ordained markers that structured daily life and encouraged prosperity. This emphasis on cosmic order with Sin at its center reflects the broader Mesopotamian worldview, where divine forces governed all aspects of life. This is Babylonian mythology worldwide, an article. We're just going to go through certain points this article makes. So, number one, the moon deities of Babylon, it says, at the heart of lunar worship in Babylon was the chief lunar deity Sin, also known as Nana. Revered as the god of the moon, Sin was associated with wisdom, illumination, and the time of measurement. I hope you all are picking up on some keywords, right? Wisdom, illumination, right? So it says the chief lunar deity, Sin, was often depicted with a crescent moon above his shoulders, symbolizing his dominion over the night sky. His role extended beyond mere lunar observation. He was considered a guardian of travelers and a provider of guidance during dark hours. I wonder why there's Sabbaths being celebrated during dark hours instead of going by the sun. Other lunar figures and roles in mythology, in addition to Sin, other lunar figures enriched Babylonian mythology. So you had Ishtar, you had Utu, Gilgamesh, and also cycles, who represented the phase of life, death, rebirth, and timekeeping. Now, the significance of the lunar cycle was integral to the Babylonian understanding of time and nature. The ancient Babylonians developed a lunar calendar that closely tracked the phases of the moon, which influenced many aspects of their lives. Understanding the lunar calendar in ancient Babylon, the Babylonian lunar calendar consisted of 12 months, each beginning with a new month. The cyclical nature of time was reflected in the agricultural practices, religious observations, and the societal organization. The phases of the moon dictated agricultural activities. So the new moon, a time for planting, full moon, optimal for harvesting, waning moon, a period for rest and preparation for the next cycle. The festival of the full moon celebrated the peak lunar energy with feasting and community gatherings. Ritual practices and lunar worship. Lunar worship in Babylon included a variety of rituals and ceremonies designed to honor the moon and its deities. Common rituals performed, lighting of fires at night to symbolize illumination, recitation of hymns and prayers to invoke the blessings of sin, and special dances performed during festivals to celebrate lunar phases. Use of offerings and sacrifices, foods, grains, fruits, so things that were associated with sacrifices. The role of priests and priestesses in lunar celebrations, they were conducting rituals, interpreting omens and messages from the moon, and maintaining the sacred spaces dedicated to moon worship. Now, I also want to play this video that came along with this article, so watch this video very quickly and then I'll come back.
Sin, also known as Nana in Sumerian, was indeed the ancient Mesopotamian god of the moon. Sin was a significant deity in Mesopotamian mythology and religion. Particularly in Sumerian and Akkadian cultures, Sin was often depicted as a bearded man wearing a headdress with a crescent moon on it, which represented his association with the moon. He was considered one of the more prominent gods in the Mesopotamian pantheon and was revered as a god of great importance. The moon was seen as a celestial body with a cyclical nature, and Sin was believed to govern the moon's phases. In Mesopotamian religious practices, Sin held a role in divination, as lunar phases and celestial events were used to interpret omens. Temples dedicated to Sin existed in various Mesopotamian cities, including Ur and Haran, where priests would conduct rituals and observations of the moon. In Mesopotamian mythology, Sin was often depicted as the son of Enlil, the god of the air, and Ninlil, the goddess of the wind. He was also considered the father of the sun god, Utu, Shamash, and the goddess of love and fertility, Inanna, Ishtar. In Mesopotamian mythology, it was believed that Sin embarked on a nightly journey across the sky. This journey was often described as a boat voyage in a celestial boat, symbolizing the moon's movement across the night sky. The phases of the moon were closely observed and held great significance in Mesopotamian divination and astrology.
Now, why do I say that it's all likelihood that the god Sin, the false god Sin, is in relation to Lucifer? So there's a number of things that we can say about it. And by the way, I'm very aware that in pagan world, there's so many different things that people will use to worship Lucifer. Some people worship the sun to worship Lucifer. Some people worship Saturn to worship Lucifer. So there's not like one thing that this is the only thing that they use to worship Lucifer. But here's something I want you to pay attention to about this false deity. So I'm going to read from Britannica. This is again on Sin. And it says, in Mesopotamian religion, the god of the moon, Sin was the father of the sun god. Okay, so he was the father of the sun god, as the video also said, Shamash. And in some myths, Ishtar, goddess of Venus. And with them formed an astral triad of deities, okay? Sin is considered a member of the special class of Mesopotamian gods called the Anunnaki. So essentially, this deity was the chief Anunnaki. Also, as we read, he was supposedly associated with wisdom. What does Lucifer get associated with inside of the occult? He gets associated with enlightenment. Oh, do you want to be like God? Do you want to have knowledge of good and evil? Well, let me enlighten you and give you more knowledge, right? Also, obviously, the illumination of the sun. So the moon being illuminated, that's what's taught inside of the pagan society as far as how the world or the universe, they say, works. And what is Lucifer? He's looked at inside of the occult as illumination. Essentially, he is the light bearer, the light bringer. So all of these things are pointing to the fact that this adherence to the moon cycles, in rejection of Yah's pronouncement to have the sun be the great sign, that this is directly linked to the worship of Lucifer. So with that being said, let's go forward and talk more about these lunar Sabbaths, because I've gotten over time a lot of different comments, different people, particularly whenever I was talking about the Sabbath and whatnot, because there is a mass teaching that there are these lunar Sabbaths, right? In fact, let's actually start with talking about the lunar Sabbaths. What are they? So this website, lunarsabbath.org, they say lunar Sabbath calendar is a lunisolar calendar in which the days of the month and the days of the week are determined by the cycle of the moon. Okay, where did we hear that? That the moon would determine a cycle? We read that inside of the Book of Jubilees. The first day of the month is the new moon day, and the following day will be the first day of the week. This means that the timing of the Sabbath day, the seventh day of the week, will change each month instead of always occurring on a regular 7-day cycle, hence the term lunar Sabbath. Each month on the lunar Sabbath calendar begins with the new moon day. The reckoning of this day is done using various methods, such as calculating the lunar conjunction or by observation of the crescent moon. The new moon day is followed by 4 weeks that consist of 6 working days and a Sabbath. The result is the Sabbaths always falling on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th of the month. The format of the calendar is based on several doctrinal points. Nowhere in scriptures, number one, nowhere in scriptures does it ever say that the 7 days of the week are continuous, repeating without any additional days in between. Okay? The week is always described as 6 working days followed by a Sabbath. Ezekiel 46:1 shows that the new moon day is not one of the 7 days of the week. We'll investigate that ourselves. Genesis 1:14, Leviticus 23:3, and Psalms 104:19 prove that the weekly Sabbath days are moedim, and their timing is determined by the moon. There are 72 pinpointed lunar Sabbaths in Scripture, which prove that this calendar was in use at that time. So let's start this off with Ezekiel 46:1. Supposedly, according to lunarsabbath.org, they say that Ezekiel 46:1 shows that the new moon day is not one of the 7 days of the week. All right, so it says, this is what Yahuwah Elohim says, the gate of the inner courtyard facing east shall be shut for the 6 working days, but it shall be open on the Sabbath day and open on the day of the new moon. Okay, so this is something so important that I just continually emphasize, because when I tell you so many things have been done by translators that it just goes over our head and we just don't think to question it. So many things have been done by translators. In fact, that was he who translates is apparently the one who determines the understanding of most people, determines what is and what is not. Because the word moon here, as translated, is actually mistranslated, as I will show you. The word moon should actually be month. Let's read that. So we're going to Strong's. This is the word Chodesh, and it is translated as months. Months are new moon, okay? Now, the question for us is, why is it translated as months? Months are new moon. Is it translated as moon because the people who we have regarded as the authentic Hebrews have told us that a new moon is a new month? Or is that actually what the word means, okay? Let's go to this article I'm about to read. Chodesh means month and not new moon. This is by Samuel Thompson, teaching overseer at Shilaik to the Nations. So the Hebrew word Chodesh is as defined in Torah. The first time the Hebrew word Chodesh is in Genesis 7:11, and the second time the word is used in Genesis 8:4. In both occasions, the text is clearly dealing with the 17th day of the month. At this time, if one uses the siding or conjunction of the new moon, meaning every time you see this word, you think it's saying new moon, then the fact that the moon is waning and thus is physically unable to be associated with any new moon translation. Meaning, in this particular instance, in these instances, is talking about something other than the moon, because if you're talking about the new moon, then how could it be talking about the new moon if the new moon is waning? It says the first time the word Chodesh is used in Torah in Genesis 7:11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same time were all fountains of the great deep broken up and the windows of heaven were opened. The second time the word Chodesh is used in the Torah is in Genesis 8:4. The ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month upon the mountains of Ararat. The word Chodesh is found more than 200 times in the Torah. Each time it is translated as month. In the Torah, this is the word used to mean month and significantly not moon. There are 3 instances where in the translation of the KJV, the word month has been added into the English translation where it does not actually exist in the Hebrew text of the Torah, but has been inferred. In the Torah, the moon is only mentioned 4 times, once in connection with the prophetic sign of Joseph's dream, once in Deuteronomy 33:14 concerning the growth of fruits and vegetables, and twice in Deuteronomy 4:18 and 17:3 concerning forbidden worship practices of the pagan nations. It says Moses, or Moshe, does not teach anything at all concerning the moon and being in association with the calendar. At this point, we must stop and consider Yahuwah's warning through Moshe of curses that will be placed on the practice of adding or taking away from his instructions. To jump to the conclusion, from Torah, meaning the instructions, the word, Chodesh only means month and never moon. In the Torah, Moshe does not give any instructions that associate a moon or a new moon or the moon in any of its phases with a scriptural calendar. Except for a few specific instances, the word Chodesh in the Hebrew text of the Tanakh is translated as month. On the few occasions where Chodesh is translated as new moon, it can readily be replaced by the translation month to be compliant with the Torah of Yahuwah without changing the contextual meaning of the scripture. So the full PDF will be posted on my Patreon, but just to wrap this up, we have to understand what is it that the Synagogue of Satan is trying to spread to the masses as far as participating inside of rituals that will bring them farther away from Yahuwah and instead closer to the forces of darkness. One major thing that they want us engaged in is moon worship. True, it's covert moon worship. Most people don't think that they're worshiping the moon, even in Judaism. However, when you talk about placing Yah's calendar out of its original order, and when you talk about emphasizing the moon as being the great sign and going against Yah's great sign, which was the sun, and when you talk about inventing Sabbaths and calling these ones Moedim and saying that the Sabbath that came from Yahuwah is not Moedim, despite the fact that literally inside of Leviticus, it says it's a feast day. In fact, let me just read that scripture in case anyone wants to challenge me there. Leviticus 23 says, Yahuwah spoke again to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Yasharel and say to them, Yahuwah appointed times which you shall proclaim as holy convocations. My appointed times are these. And guess what was number 1? The 7th-day Sabbath. For 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th day there is a Sabbath of complete rest, a holy convocation. You shall not do any work. It is a Sabbath to Yahuwah in all your dwellings. So this is what it is. This is what Yah said. This is what he created. And are we to be surprised of the deceptions that are being planted by a singular institution called a Sanhedrin that I believe is the physical assembly that's representing a spiritual assembly, honestly, and one that is beyond being seen. So do we take directives from those people? Do we take their directions about the Torah from them? Or do we allow the Torah to interpret itself, to speak for itself, without any add-ons from people who have said that they have a higher knowledge than that which is already written? So I pray that you meditate on this and definitely go to Yahuwah. It is my true belief that regardless of what I think, regardless of what anyone thinks, that we are all flesh and we rely on the Ruach HaKodesh as the true teacher. And so rather than relying on people and men, I encourage every single one of you, if you know the Ruach HaKodesh, if you know Yahusha HaMashiach, if you've been born again and you've called on the Spirit to resurrect you, that you take this teaching, if it's a conflict to you, take it to the Most High and pray on it and seek Him. Allow Him to guide you. I'm a true believer that if you go in sincerity of heart, detaching yourself from all of the traditions of man and just go looking for truth, that Yah is a rewarder of those who seek Him, and He will reveal to you the truth about these unclean days. So I thank you all for watching. Yah willing, I'll see you all in the next video.
Verse 37, it says, the children of Abraham who came to him, who believed in him, he told them, unless you discover the truth, unless you come to believe, and after believing, search for the truth. Go into scriptures, find the truth in order to be set free. The nation that has suffered slavery is the nation of Israel. The descendants of Israel, of Jacob, have been enslaved several times. People who have been enslaved, people who have been colonized, people who have been denied their rights are the people of Israel. And they have been told that many nations will benefit from your land. Until today, they are still under bondage of slavery and idolatry. Why should I mention idolatry here? Because they are misrepresenting Jesus into images. This is Moses. This is Paul. Yet, those images are the images of, or I can call them the photos of people we live with. It is total idolatry. So they need the truth in order to worship God in spirit. That's why Jesus turned and told the Samaritan woman, the worshippers should worship in spirit and in truth. Spirit, it means when you close your eyes, you go into spiritual realm and you avoid to use any image in your spiritual realm. Otherwise, you will find yourself worshiping idols. That's why even God said, you shall not have any graven image. Graven image means any drawings around you that you can refer as God. But what happened today to the church? The church has got many gods full of images. And somehow we call them saints. Yes, if they are saints, are they God? They have gone ahead of us. Should we worship them? No. So the descendants of Abraham are not free today because they are practicing idolatry. Their land has been scrambled and partitioned and given different names. That's why there is a lot of confusion around the world. And people think the original land of the descendants of Abraham is in the Middle East. No. They were being promised a land full of minerals, a green land full of milk and honey, which is very far opposite from the land in the Middle East, a very dry place. Some of these descendants of Abraham are still living in captivity. Many of them are living in Americas, bearing different names. Where is the truth? Jesus told them, until you discover the truth, that's when you become free. The only thing, the church, I'm coming to you today, the only thing that sets you free is the truth. Only God can help us uncover the truth. May God help us to uncover the truth. Notice this very clearly. The truth is painful to take because it makes some businesses collapse. It can change the thinking discourse of believers. When we believe in images, and now we are told we don't need to depend on images, it shifts our thinking discourse. Some of our businesses can collapse when we begin to uncover the truth. That's why truth is very painful.